Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. It's wonderful to see you all.
How do you do, Mr. Sylvain?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm well. I think I need to adjust my name. One moment, please.
All right. Sean.
Mr. Patrick Sylvain, how are you today? And then there's Nancy. Is that Nancy Ann Miller? Okay, Patrick Sylvain, how are you?
Yes, I'm okay. I'm doing well. How about you?
Great. Good, good. And Naima Wade, how are you? Can't hear you. Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
I'm good. Thank you.
Good. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
There's Shanique Burton and then there's Jalen Simmons. Maison
And
Ayoka.
Mr. Mervyn Ware is here as well.
Wonderful, a cover artist. Did a great job, Mervyn. Elaine Savory. Elaine, you took care of, you get taken care of? Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're
I
welcome.
now have it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry about that.
No. It's technology. It's not your fault.
Yes. Okay. Well, it's 6 o'clock and we want to welcome you to the Caribbean Writers, the second series of reader response discussions, the after dinner affair. I hope you had a wonderful dinner and it's in the process of digestion right now. This series highlights the works published in volume 35, themed Diasporic Rhythms, Interrogating the Past, Imagining a Future. It's an edition we dedicated to Edward Kamau Brathwaite, who served as one of our editorial advisory board members for decades. He was always accessible and very supportive. We'll also have some tributes that will be shared by persons who wrote tributes in the journal. We'll begin actually with a tribute. And of particular note is that we published some of Edward Kamau Brathwaite's writings that were never before published. In fact, one of the pieces that we published, he actually complained in a footnote that he sent it to a number of other journals and it had not been published. But it was a very sad piece, and I think that because of the nature of the piece, it was a little controversial. So we've invited members of the audience to help us to bring this to life with excerpts from one of these selections by reading it for us tonight. Then we invite the audience to respond to the reading in a 2 or 3 minute response. Additionally, tributes will be read, and we ask each author who's going to read a tribute to share some of the Kamau Brathwaite insights that they may have. And finally, generally, we've also invited other authors who did not necessarily write tributes, but wrote great poetry, to share their work with us as well and tell us their inspiration for writing a poem. And because this event is taking place in the dead of the night on some continents, you know, some people couldn't join us because it's midnight in some places and 2 o'clock in the morning in some places, and so they were not able to make it. So, but there was one person who sent us a note, and I'd like to read that note. His name is Kamau White. He's a London-based Jamaican writer, a poet, teacher, and musician. He says, Kamau Brathwaite's work as it relates to diasporic rhythms, interrogating the past, imagining the future, references the poet and historian as one of the founders, along with Andrew Saki, of the Caribbean artist movement in London in 1966. Brathwaite's longer poems tell us a story of history, of worldwide territories and their interface with Africa. As a reader, I find the power of his work imaginative to the extent, certainly, that the cultural continuities still exist in the consciousness of exploring the past, ancient and modern connections between African culture, and the world. Kamau's striking African and Caribbean rhythms are employed in how he writes his verse and uses a tone as part of his construction. In fact, as a poet musician, I find myself singing the poems as though they are performance pieces. In addition to the rhythmic structure, Brathwaite uses language as a historian to tell a story whilst examining ancestral links pre and post-slavery. His reference to word phrases in his work, such as cat o' nine tails, the hamburger hat, cattle walks, martel nut blasting, madrigal, kenki, go on and come back, all echo throughout the structure of the poem. Of note is the poet's use of family members, elders, the spiritual, cultural, social, moral dimensions, context, nature, world history, and so on. And I won't read anymore, but he has written an extensive piece, and he wants us to wish everyone a good night. And to extend his. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the members of our team. Charlene Spencer, the other half of the Caribbean writer. Adrian Wajasa, our consultant, who is another portion of the Caribbean writer. And Matthias Clavier, who is at UVI with us. He is the Assistant Director of Communications, Distance Learning and Technology for the School of Agriculture. And he has been one of our right hand in the Literary Festival, as well as the Book Festival. We want to acknowledge this is the team that worked together to put this piece together. And also we want to acknowledge some of our sponsors, the Department of Tourism. We also want to acknowledge the sponsors who sponsor our prizes, the St. Croix Avis, the Daily News, ex-Governor John DeYoung. His prize is dedicated to his wife, Cecile DeYoung. And one of the prizes that we're particularly proud of is a prize that's been sponsored by Dasyl Williams, who's the wife of the former deceased editor of the Caribbean writer, Marvin Williams. So we have 4 prizes. We used to have 6, and we're hoping to establish some additional prizes. And then we also have a prize that's been installed by Dr. Vincent Cooper, a UVI professor who was a longtime member of the Caribbean Writers Editorial Board. And we want to thank our board members, Dr. Valerie Kumbi, Dr. Patricia Harkins-Pierre, and we had John Robert Lee was on this particular board, and Dr. Vincent Cooper was on the board as well. And joining us now is Berkeley Wendell Semple, who's a Guyanese poet and author based in New York. He has just recently joined our board, and we're really happy to have him join our editorial board. As you know, the Caribbean Writer Board is all of the pieces that are sent to us. I'm the first reader, and then they're advanced to the level of the board. It's all done in a blind way. We never see who the submitters are until at the end of the process. And Ms. Spencer is the one that collects the pieces at the door, forwards them to us, takes off the unique identifiers, and that's how the process keeps going, so that we're able to provide a fair and impartial approach to selecting the pieces. Because we get hundreds of pieces every year, and we can't publish everything, and some very good pieces don't make it. But we usually depend on the votes that are sent in by the board, and we have a set of rubrics that we use to determine which pieces have been selected, and if they rate us at a certain level, those are the pieces that are sent to the Caribbean writer. So we try to keep it refereed, and you don't have to pay anything to publish in the Caribbean writer, so that we always maintain our ability to give voice to the emerging authors and the established authors within the region, because over the years, we've had a number of authors support us. We're proud of the prizes. Last year we had Rohan Facey was a winner of the Vincent Cooper Literary Prize, and Nathalie Cortesy is the winner of the Marvin E. Williams Prize. Rajiv Ram Palawan is the winner of the Cecile DeYoung Prize, and the Daily News Prize was won by Camilo Rivera, and the Knut Broadhurst Prize, which is sponsored by the St. Croix Avis, was won by Eugenia O'Neill. And so without further ado, we'd like to begin with our tributes, and Alexander Opicho will read, no, I'm sorry, Patrick Sylvain will read Rebutting Arrivants. Patrick?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I got it.
Can we have,
May-
Charlene, can
may-
you introduce Mr. Sylvain, please?
Yes, please.
Read his bio so that he doesn't have to do that as well.
Okay. Patrick Sylvain is a poet from Haiti, writer, social, and literary critic. He was twice nominated for the Pushcart Prize, having been published in several creative anthologies, journals, reviews. He has degrees from the University of Massachusetts, Harvard University, Boston University. Mr. Sylvain is on the faculty of Brown University's Africana Studies. He's also the Cheryl Dorothy Robbins Creative Writing Prize Fellow at Brandeis University, where he is a PhD candidate. His poetry chapbook, Underworlds, is published by Central Square Press 2018, and his forthcoming book is to be published by Beacon Press, and it's titled Education Across Borders, Immigration, Race, and Identity in the Classroom.
Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I've been published several times in the Caribbean Writers as well. So it's
Yes.
a pleasure to be, in a sense, home, although this is my first reading. Before I read my poem, I would simply say that the first book that was given to me, The Arrivant, back in 1986, and coming from Haiti, I was just learning to speak English in about 4 or 5 years. And I really could not understand the book. I plowed myself through, and it took me, I would say that perhaps 10 years later, I went back into the book when I was a member of the Darkroom Writers Collective. And then it wasn't really until another 5 years or 15 years later that I really understood what Brathwaite was doing. And still to this day, whenever I go back and reread Brathwaite, I'm discovering something new. So in a sense, this is a way of dialoguing with Brathwaite, rebutting arrivants. My eyes are examining the stone thrown islands in this curved tail archipelago we call home. Some barely possessing trees, others pockmarked by sugar mills. Still, hands persist, clapping against the evasiveness of a word, the word, liberty, liberté, libertad. We want a fire. There is no turning back. We are a people from different branches of the same African tree, broken, strewn by histories of conquest, deadly desires for rum and precious sweets. Our beloved hearts bearing the marks of Cain's, like you are still dreaming of the word, love that bleeds behind our hollow eyes. I know about your brain limping pain. We too cry with curled tongues, hoping the sea will smooth our language of pain, the hot iron that branded the drums of our throats. Why scream in cold silence? The abyss is absent of tenderness, and we are archangels with fiery swords thrusting words like swords. Words must be shattered, uttered, blown into conch shells so that malign ears might bleed the molasses of our blood.
Wonderful. Oh, that was that resonates with me very well, very well. Can I ask you, Patrick, what particular aspect of the arrivants are why did you title that Rebutting Arrivants?
Right. So I wanted to call it dialoguing, the event, and then rebutting could be against, right? But it's also could be re-arguing the arrivants, right? And I think for me, the entire project, it's one in which he is doing this kind of Pan-Africanist decolonial project in which the entire Caribbean is interrogated, right? And unfortunately, because of conquest, speaking different languages, French, English, and Spanish, there's a tendency of not really knowing the other thinkers, writers, artists from the other Caribbean islands. And it wasn't, like I said, until I came to this country, being with other writers, that I learned of Kamau and Derek Walcott and others. And it wasn't, again, until I started to learn the history of the Caribbean that I was able to fully understand what Kamau Brathwaite was doing in relationship to conquest, in relationship to poetry. So for me, it still is, right, a revelation that the language that Kamau spoke is the same language that it's really spoken in Haiti, but it's in a different way. It's still about the word. It's still about the notions that what has given to us has caused us so much pain, right? It's about fire. It's about water. So for example, in the arrivant, the cabin, under the burnt out green of the small yards, tufts of grass where water was once used to wash pots, pen, pose, okra appears, a rusted bucket, hole kicked into its bottom, lies on its side. I mean, something like that, right? The imagery, it's something in which those of us from the Caribbean, it's like, okay, we are there, right? You are speaking the same language, although in a different register, right? And so we can, in a sense, see that whether it's Barbados, St. Lucia, Haiti, Jamaica, Trinidad, or wherever, what conquest did to us, it's a pock marking, right? It's the same whip, it's the same blood, except that we have a different kind of expression, different ways of dealing with the past. And I admire what Brathwaite did with language and history.
Very good. Thank you for that. Are there any responses to Mr. Sylvain's poem or his response to his poem? Anyone would like to contribute a thought?
Well, I don't have a comment, but I have a question. Those last three lines, particularly the phrase "maligned ears," I'm not sure where to place that. Whose ears are these?
That would be the colonizers. Even for example, in the U.S., there is this war, like this campaign against critical race theory, right? The refusal for many Republicans not to even use slavery, not to teach about slavery, right? And so not wanting to hear about the past, not wanting to hear what European countries have done. And I would say there are perhaps certain folks within the Caribbean who might feel ashamed, right, of the past, who might not want to hear about slavery, who might not want to hear about the ugly past, right? Because the mirror is very difficult to face the mirror, right? So it's not just descendants of colonizers who are refusing to acknowledge the past, but descendants of victims of colonization might not want to hear the past.
Right. That's what I sort of picked up. Like it could go both ways, and I'm like, well, who exactly, right? because these same scares were bleeding our blood. So I like that.
So is there any, place your comments, those of you who, if you don't want to speak, you can put your comments in the comment box and we'll read them for you. Thank you very much for your attentiveness, but you can also comment. Okay, is
Slandy Preston said beautiful, yes. I'm sorry, go ahead.
yes. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to add that what Professor Sylvain said really resonates with me. I'm from Haiti too, and before prior to moving to the United States, I'm in Boston. Like, I had never heard of Brathwaite or Jamaica Kincaid or like Audre Lorde's connections like with the Caribbean, and like being in the US and having access to feminist circles and just like different circles where we can discuss different like women in the liberation struggle. I just had like no idea that we had this sort of legacy or heritage. And as far as colonizers refusing to hear about their stories and histories, that resonates also because it's interesting that people will travel to Boston to do the Freedom Trail or do like on a Boston Tea Party site visit or something like that, but aren't willing to have conversations about riots or police brutality or anything like that. So yeah, thank you. That's all I wanted to add.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Sandy.
Thank you. And if I may add to that, sort of, I'm also in Boston as well. So you could also think in terms of, I mean, because Brathwaite is concerned about the plantations, right? And you could also think in terms of the tourism plantation, where hotels that are built on former plantation sites, but yet the tourists do not want anything to do with the other side, the non-pristine side of the Caribbean. And when you travel throughout the Caribbean, you could see large cauldron, right? The old cauldron that used to brew the sugar canes and so forth, that are still in certain places. So there is a kind of silencing of the past, as sort of Michel Trouillot would say, and it is that kind of silencing that Kamau Brathwaite and Derek Walcott and so many other writers are sort of refusing, right, to allow to be silenced. Is to enter into a dialogue not only with the past but with the present conditions of the Caribbean.
I agree with that. I know that George Lamming, another of our board member, he has always been an author who has also always talked about the new tourism plantation that we have in the Caribbean. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment, or is the other person here that had asked that had indicated they would read tonight? I'm sorry, I have a sore throat.
Mr. Alexander Pichu, it does not.
Oh, he has arrived? Okay, Mr.
No, I don't see him. No, I don't see him. Yes,
okay.
And he is based in Kenya, so I believe that might be a challenge in terms of the time, perhaps.
Okay. I think it's about 2 o'clock in the morning there now.
Yeah.
Okay, so if he does arrive, fine. But let's move on to the reading of the piece that we had identified. Certain members of the audience has agreed to read with us. This Man Telling the Artist, or The Second Time of Salt, which is an original piece that we published in volume 35, that was dedicated to Kamau Brathwaite. So this one begins, this man telling the artist, the second time of salt, and the work may be the flame, but the person is the candle, and C-Y-A-N-D-L-E, candle. He writes in a way that that phonetically. And so that has been part of the challenge of reading Brathwaite, is understanding the rhythms of the Caribbean speech and being able to place the rhythm where it is in terms of the way he's put the phonetic pieces together. So It begins artificial limbs, sacrifice, even and accepted as torture. Yours per social, internal, ours external, internal. We still have no quest. We still have to question why, explore why is it. Indeed, the tortured person does not think, but must make others in theirs feel the pain, if only so the travesty does not occur again. I feel your pain and feel the pain of the powerless, and can only think at this time now to wonder at why it has continued for so long. Maybe you are a Messiah and this is your crucifixion from Babylon the bandit. It is no comfort, I know. The only comfort you can feel is in. And then there's a footnote there. That was kind of I'm trying to read in the rhythm because it's written in the rhythm. And I think that's part of the challenge of publishing works like this, is that you have to make sure that if you're reading for a wide audience, that you publish works that will resonate in the way that the writer intended. And while it is, we feel that people who read Caribbean works should become engaged with the language, and so experiment with the way that some of the new writers are writing. He says, the first time of Salt is undergone mainly at Irish Town, Jamaica, 1986, 1990, when KB, which is Kamau Brathwaite, loses Zia Mexican to cancer, 1986, the Zia Mexican Diary, 1993, his archives and home no longer loom to hurricane, 2 years later, 1988, and almost the rest of his life to gunmen at Marley Manor. So Brathwaite, in this particular piece, he is writing about some of the unfortunate experiences he had in his life, and some of it is a little overpowering. And he charges that a number of the journals within the region didn't publish this piece, and some of it may have been because we're trying to situate how to approach publishing something like this. So that's just an excerpt from that, and we'll have the first reader will read one of the first sections. I believe it's is it Princeton or Alisa Valas? Who's reading the first one, Charlie?
Slandy Princeton.
Slandy Princeton.
Thank you.
I can only, pardon me?
The one that begins in "you will," I'm sure.
Yes, you will, I'm sure, be surprised.
Yes.
Okay. You will, I'm sure, be surprised that I'm so suddenly no longer at NYU. Indeed, even as you was opening your site to all the response we've had, Ref CP. The Tiffin CL of my archives had started in my apartment on Washington Square Park, though it is only now, as I write this, am I aware of the alignment of these two negative happenings? Some people, now I recall, had always linked CP with my NYC cultural lynching, but I've never myself seen, felt, recognized the possibility until now. I can only provoke this record. Late in 2004, we began to notice strange activity in our NYU apartment. More and more books, manuscripts, work in progress, teaching material, works of art, my spiritual possessions, disappearing from their shelves and boxes. With the authorities, the authors of my being there, unwilling and or reluctant for the first 3 years of the going-ons to become involved. In the end, they changed our front door locks and put in a door to help protect the room where most of my archives were kept. But this made no difference to the Tiffin, and since they declined to put in security, though this had once at some level been discussed, we installed at our expense our own contracted security cameras, etc., though this made no difference to the highly skillful and relentless Tiffin from our rooms, accompanied by the almost universal mantra from everybody, friends, colleagues, the authorities, even from those members of the Caribbean and other press who, in my view, should have at least brought the situation to public attention, that nothing was in fact going on, figment of my imagination, especially as the university security officers and the unofficial help they had from the NYPD and other sources kept making the point that there was, again, nothing they could do since there was no evidence of break-in. Though let me add, there was never any forensic investigation from any of these bodies, though I can make no claim, nor word that they nor anybody I know were in any way involved with this cultural lynching, but it was going on.
Okay, and let me read a footnote. There's a footnote to that particular piece that Slandy read. It says, amazing how many people, some quite close, who insisted that these losses were merely material goods and things shattered, making it clear how wide a gap between artists and non-artists is, and making it all easier for the lynchers to destroy me without fear or interference, and how clever they were to recognize this about our society. And I include most of the Western worlders, not only the usual suspects in the Caribbean, in this frustration and hurt, which has so contributed to my so easy destruction. The loss, theft of my mother poem, this burns me out forever, but I'm told it's just a thing, something to get over, to get lost in that other sense. So in this particular piece, you could hear Brathwaite crying out, and crying out for his losses he was experiencing. And he claims that those of us who he complained to did not respond and thought that perhaps he was complaining too much. And so it's one of the things that you look back now, it's a work of art now. When you read it, you can kind of, you see the way he puts those sentences together and the language. And so, but in his life, he says that his pleadings fell on deaf ears, even among the people who he was very close to in the Caribbean. Are there any responses to that? Any comments to that particular reading? Anyone would like to comment on that? That's on page 72.
To me, what's amazing is it's almost you know, how alert and mindful that he was in relationship to the fact that, in a sense, it's almost like the institution was making him crazy, right? Or making him sound as if he was crazy. And yet no forensic investigation was done. And also one wonders, you know, where are those manuscripts, those books, things that were stolen, whether or not at some point they would be in some kind of circulation. And here again, we could think the teething, right, is again theft of property, personal property. And what he is saying, in a sense, is the people or group of people who stole his stuff knew exactly what they were doing, right? So they knew the potential worth of his stuff. In other words, and also we are, in a sense, deprived of those stolen manuscripts.
Yeah, you know, it is. I'm really happy to be able to publish this, even if it's after his death. But you could see that there was a lot of pain in what he was writing, and he felt like frustrated about being in it alone and not being taken seriously. Anyone else would like to comment on that particular section of the selection
May
of the
I,
choice?
Alcis?
Sure, go right ahead. Sure, go right ahead.
Hi everyone. Alcis, thank you so much for inviting me to share today. I just think this is a wonderful moment to celebrate a great poet. I just wanted to say something about what I'm looking at on the page. I'm not sure if everyone is able to actually be looking at page 72 and 73. I hope everyone who's in the room is able to do that. But it strikes me as I'm looking at page 72 that the words "no difference" are in big, bold print.
Mm-hmm.
And on page 73, he again has extra bold for "figment of my imagination." And that really resonates, I think, with what you've just said, Alcis. I think it's reflecting his desire to express that pain and to have it really pop off the page and pull you in to give a closer listen to, I mean, a very strong emotion that he's trying to share with us as the reader. So it's not just oral, it really is also very much visual when you see it on the page.
Thank you for that.
I would like to make a comment about, I can't imagine anything more painful than manuscripts being taken. I mean, when you think of your work as a writer, and if there was a fire in your house, what would you save? Well, your writing, your poems, your artwork. So that act of cruelty had to be devastating. I mean, that's taking your soul, I think.
Okay. And I think he felt kind of locked away in a sense, in a room, in a world of darkness, because it seemed that nobody who he reached out to, no one who he reached out to responded. In fact, it appears that they thought he may have not been in his right mind. So I think that was one of the concerns that I see that comes up off the page.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
And
thank
for
you.
me,
Let's go on
just-
to.
No, I was just going to say, just the title. It's that title resonates throughout. You know what we just read. It's piece by piece. They're dismantling him, the person.
Yeah, that's right.
Just stripping him away.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
and that he's saying that they know that this is how people respond to it in the region, is that people will destroy you, and other people will look on, and they know that people will not lift a hand if they perhaps say the right set of things. Oh, this person is crazy, or this person doesn't know, and people will step away and not support you because they want to be politically correct. So he's he's kind of reaching out here. Okay, so the second section, part 2.
Is Alicia Velaspolius.
Okay, Alicia Velas is reading that.
Hi, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Hi.
So it was that I ended up in hospital in August 2008. One doc said, trauma. How does one cope with the vagabond spiritual loss of one's heritage and achievement and have that loss scoffed and laughed at and ignored and have gone downhill ever since? The medical people, like the security, unable, they say, to locate, despite the one-off trauma, what was wrong with me. Though by now, am I losing weight from 180 to 150 pounds of induced suffering, you would never have recognized me. Sleepless and going blind, increasingly weak and withering and unable, therefore, to accept any of the many invitations from many parts of the world to mark my 80th birthday in May 2010. Indeed, I can't go get out anywheres. A proper pijamanero. A man whose life, love, and livelihood has been too taken from him. At the same time, again, perhaps only a coincidence, there is pressure from the university for me to retire on grounds of age. By this time, I too weak to teach anyway, and because, believe it or not, it might be the best solution to the cultural lynching, since we clearly not comfortable with wash excuse, etc., 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 it would be better to return to the Caribbean sand and sea where I could sit and think and write. Along slides again, more coincidence. My relation with my department deteriorates. As if I was never there. As if I'd made no contribution. No successful graduate or undergraduate classes. No planning of the aborted Slave Abolition Conference 2019, after the early literature one with Orlando Patterson, Antonio Martinez Rojo, The Repeating Island, Anna Broadmer, Rhonda Cobham, Sylvia Winter, who couldn't make it. No annual marasas when the classes shared and celebrated their work with each other and the university and the wider community. And when stars dropped in to take part, etc. Concluding in 2010 with a first Festival of Caribbean Film, Caribbean Tales de Frances and Solomon, with not even a PS of thanks or farewell.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And the footnote in that section I would read is, we have to add here the responsibility of our Caribbeanist, third world, post-colonialist journals, example, BIM, Hui, Wasafiri, Caribbean Writer, who names us, Essex, JCL, Transition, Sargasso, Callaloo, who of course should carry this text in full for record and for study. So far, these various editors have shown no interest. One of the reasons why I call this teaching deliberate and planned and evil-minded is not only the effect on my health and consequently my job and career, but how it is continued into the middle passage of our moving back to the Caribbean. The losses continue on board ship, as it were. Think copies of my latest and perhaps last book, The Liguas and More, help our bookcases, though unlike the slave ship, nobody did an inventory. So that was a footnote to that as well. I'd like to welcome some comments on that section as well. Anybody else want to comment on that section?
That last line is powerful. Like it's like, I don't know. The words stay with me, like they resonate.
Yeah, and you know, he does call out a lot of the journals for not publishing the work. And obviously you could tell he was very sad and frustrated and disappointed, and it comes up off of the page in the way that he presents his position.
And it's, for me, it's sad because it still is what he fought and what he's fighting against still is.
Yes,
It's
we
still
do
playing
have,
out. And
interestingly, like we're living in a time like that at this time, and it's the January 6th moment in the US Capitol was like the apex of a lot of what was coming. And you know, his story here sort of gives you an insight into perhaps some of the things that brew before things happen. Are there any other comments there, folks?
If I may.
Yes.
He mentions at the university, there is pressure from the university for him to retire, in inverted commas. In this extract here, I see retire for him. It appears that this is not merely about his age, but they wish to retire everything about him, what he contributed. And he makes specific reference to his contribution in the graduate and undergraduate classes. And it's as if no one seems to care about that contribution. He also makes reference to other very critical activities, the Slave Abolition Conference and so on, which he apparently had a big part in, but I think he probably sees retirement related to his age, not only as a retirement of, not only as Brathwaite leaving the university, but so much of what he has contributed will be leaving with him. And he feels, to me, this is, he feels unappreciated. unappreciated. I think he believes also that we're not very grateful for the contribution that he has made. I get that sense as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Is there anyone else who would like to comment, do a response to that particular piece?
Yeah, what dawned on me here is the term where he says no annual marasas when the class is shared. This is clever because he is using marasas, and within it is embedded the word morass, but the marasas are twins. They're twinning. That's the twinning concept, because he is dealing with the lost manuscript is a legua, again, it's one of the orishas, and marasas is one of the spirits within Vodun, the twins. And here, no annual marasas is the recognition of the pair, right? This kind of binary, right? So when the class shared and celebrated their work, so you have the community and the university, that's the twin. But also the organizer, along with the conference, that's a kind of twinning as well. But he says when the stars dropped, so all of a sudden, those who organize the conference and so forth are no longer visible. It's only the stars, right? And so it's very interesting what he is doing, the kind of screaming through the capitalizations of those words. Abolition, the slave abolition conference, no annual marasas or morass. So it's clever. It's also sad that one would think that he was losing his bearings, in a sense, when he was writing this.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Well, is there anyone else who would like to comment on that piece? If not, we'll move on to the next section. Ms. Spencer?
Dr. Natalie Cordesi.
By Emancipation Day 2011, I find myself deported back to the plantation and so weak that they have to weave me through JFK in a wheelchair, and still nobody paying attention. Can you imagine? The above is like the data of a second time of the salt. It does not explain anything. The pain, the teething, and the undiagnosed illness, and the sudden death, displacement of retirement in the full flight of mediating and meditating upon my postgraduate course in Middle Passage. MR, Psychorax Aesthetics, the slave, Africaner's plantation hero, the alternative, alternation, the concept of it, and extreme lyric, tramp carnival radiance. These, among other new pathfinding ideas, is post-coloniality. Have had to be summarily abandoned, contradicted by the basilic of Washington Square, extending, of course, into my writing, Mr. Slow Horses, Elegaus, G2, The Love, Axel. These last two, I've not yet even been able to proofread and return to the publishers, not to mention, not to think about the unfinished trilogy, Missa, Rwanda, Dead Man Witness. This cultural lynching, CL, has resulted in my sudden, I have to repeat the word, total destruction, loss of heritage job, career, income, health, as if I had been poisoned, some radioactive medallion. Alexander Litvinenko, 2006, engraved to swallow. And who, why, WD have done all this to us?
Whew. Thank you for that. Do you have a response to that piece, Natalie? Ms. Corsi?
You know, Elsis, I'm very, very moved
Yeah, I moved
by
as
this
well.
piece. And I found that as I was reading, I was getting goose pimples, you know. It started to rock me. And I was a little nervous starting out because of, again, as I mentioned, how it presents on paper. And the words time of the salt this time are in a lighter font, and it's in a stanza that is in big, big bold.
Mhm.
So in a very contrasting way, different from how we saw it before. And when I think about salt and time of salt, salt really only is meaningful because it gives you a reference point against which to compare everything else that is bland. And so the way that he uses it here is so subtle, but so profound. Time of the salt. He's basically saying that, I believe what he's trying to share is that he now feels like this is his time, and that the salt that he's trying to share with it, somehow it's missed. And it can't explain what's happening, the teething, because, you know, what is this retirement you're all talking about? I'm still valid. I still am that distinctive feature. I know it, but still the teething, you know. I also am taken in by the very last bit in section 6, where it says, this cultural lynching has resulted in my sudden, I have to repeat the word, total destruction. And he has it disjointed, loss of heritage job. And I really think this is a very powerful statement that he's made. And I get a sense that there is a feeling of betrayal, that having offered so much in a lifetime career of writing, that how could this be my last moment? You know, like a disbelief. How did I get here? And those are my thoughts.
Yes, I hear you. This particular segment also resonated with me, and I felt it very deeply as well. There's a sense of betrayal just rising up off of the pages, and the way the light and the dark and we try to capture this when we laid out this page. It was a very challenging layout, and I think that's one of the reasons why we took a long time to publish, because it was very challenging to try to do it exactly the way he wrote it. And he would make it a point to tell you, I want it published exactly the way I wrote it. And sometimes I try to go back to him and say, well, you know, this needs to, he said, no, this exactly the way I wrote it. And so it was a little challenging to lay it out, but we were able to do it in a way that does still speak, the words on the page still speak beyond what they say. So are there any other comments on this section? Anyone else who would like to make a comment about the response to the reading?
I was struck by cultural lynching, describing what we now are discussing in America, systematic racism. It's like, this is what it feels like. This is what the effect of systematic racism feels like for somebody in the system. So.
Okay, well, great. I think we've come to the end of the excerpts. I'm not sure, Ms. Spencer, do you have any additional information regarding the excerpt? Have we come to the end there?
No, actually, we have through the 10. We were going to stop at 10. Mr. Sylvain had offered to take us to the end.
Mr. Sylvain, would you read for us now, please?
All right, so start from 8 or 7.
So I'm returned at the top of page 76. So I'm returned to the plantation poorer.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I return. Wait a second. Oh, yes. All right. So I'm returned to the plantation poor, more bereft than when I left, and still there, no word, no explanation, no question or outcry or concern about it. Any of this, not only as if, as I say, none of it happened, as I have done, as Césaire would say, created nothing, thought, not writ, not my 20 years at NYU. I returned to CP to find our time, my past, present, future gone. Our Serengeti, all the cows, black belly sheeps, goats, fowl, the white road Islam, fowl cock egrets, and those slam their birds of regret, donkeys, guinea birds, etc. Gone, 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 except for the brave green spaces kept by the few remaining residents. The whole place is into depressing, overgrowing wilderness. The government still in negative limbo. If we will have to move, or whether I will be granted the extension for my planed Bossa Namsetura Cultural Center and the dream of a beautiful, pristine pasture. Since I share both vectors, the CP and the CL, I can begin to repeat the point that Maroons always made in their rebellion, the plantation. And is this that without protection, thorns of resistance, palanque, or your boundaries, and for your possessions and soul, all your grains and discoveries and reclamations and dreams of freedom, independence will come to naught. And without allies, whatever you may have evolved as your culture will be filtered, faltered, infiltrated, stolen from poison, spat upon and destroyed without even the tongue or vestige or record or equal or quell to mark that you tried to existed, that you made a contribution, as if it is some strange penitential reign of retribution, certainly somebody's vengeance, you. Go to 10, yeah?
Yes,
Yes,
10,
finish
okay.
10.
10.
All right. My question is, can we now talk about this? How important to literature is the flight of the artist in crisis? I'll never forget Walter Rodney, only a few weeks, as it turns out, before his own assassination, telling a history conference on slavery in Ontario, that it was so saddening to see the enthusiasm of scholars that for the texts and archives of slavery, while they didn't even recognize, far less have any concern for the children of slavery in the streets.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Patrick. Well, can we have your response, and then we invite the rest of the members of the audience to respond as well?
Wow. He is, in a sense, referencing so many elements. I mean, the notions of the cows, the animals, the black-bellieds, and so forth. It is kind of, there is an intra-text to what happened in South Africa when many of the cows were killed, and that sort of like drove the Zulus into extreme poverty. And so his return to the plantation, again, he is going through another form of cultural lynching, and so the salt, but now it's about the maroon, right? And marooning again has its own historical poignancy, and so, but he is without protection, right? And the Maroons had a kind of understanding of protection and accord with the British, but here now there's no kind of protection, so he's left in a sense denuded, and the poison is returning back to the poison again, right? The poison that he mentioned earlier, which when he mentioned Alexander Litvinenko, which was the Soviet way of poisoning, but here it's the poison that has infiltrated into sort of his own environment, and spat upon and destroyed, and he's going back and forth between the history, his relationship with Walter Rodney, but no matter what, the history of slavery is not so far into the distance, because slavery is still with us, with the children in the streets. So he is going back and forth between history and the present, and putting himself in relationship to what happened in the Caribbean. So again, it's painful, but it's also brilliant as well.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to respond to that piece?
I'd like to respond. So one of the things that I've been getting, not specifically from this one, but from, you know, all of them that have been read so far, is a sense of anger. I'm feeling anger coming through, because it's almost as if when someone is being gaslighted, and you know you've done this, you know you've said this, but the way people are treating you, it's as if none of that happened. And through the writing, he's trying to reconcile the work that he's done for the culture, for other writers, just even for expression, and visually as well, with the way that he's being treated. And there is such a disconnect that I almost feel like he's trying to come to terms with this dynamic shift, and then being sent home and realizing that even with everything he's done, nothing has changed. You know, coming home to still see the images of devastation, the mention about the government. It's almost as if there is this, he's almost now believing this lie, but at the same time being very angry about it because he knows it's not true. Wow.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Is there anyone else who would like to respond to any pieces that were read?
Yes, this is Naima Wade.
Yes.
Something I picked up, I kept hearing Ralph Ellison's book, Invisible Man, and parts of what was just read. And I also heard Langston Hughes. There was just lines of that DNA also in him. But I also realized that it is real of post-traumatic enslavement syndrome that I read in Dr. Joy DeGoey's book, The Enduring Injury to Us in the Americas. I feel it so strongly by hearing the readings and feeling it in myself, and understanding that invisibility, but visible because of our memory that attracts or somehow we carry that enslavement. And we see it, like you said, yesterday, before that, and today. And it's very, very sad.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Is there anyone else who would like to comment on the section?
I would just like to say that I'm so struck by his openness as a writer. I mean, it's almost feminine in a way. It's so truthful. I mean, there's like nothing holding him back. And yet he can write brilliantly and play with language, as is his great gift. But I've just never heard it like I've just heard it, in the sense of there's nothing held back. And for that, I think, we're all made better citizens. That's all.
The readers did a powerful job in presenting those pieces. But there's a comment you just made about, you said his work is so open, it's almost feminine. Can you elaborate on that? It's almost feminine. Can you tell us what you mean by that?
When I said that?
Yes, what do you mean by that?
Sorry. I'm just thinking of, particularly in this country where when the voice of women writers came forward, and the truth-telling that women presented, and how that was a revelation and a revolution. So when I say almost feminine, or I just mean there's such a bold openness. It's from his heart, and yet it's brilliant intellectually. And I just, in the reading of it, hearing it read, I just responded to that. So the idea of almost feminine is a compliment of the highest.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I've heard comments about women being emotional and women being passionate, and so
Right.
sometimes, so I just wanted to see what context you were putting that particular assessment into. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that comment. Okay, I think we've come to the end of those, the readings from The Time of Salt and the pieces by Brathwaite. And we'd like to go and share with you now some of the pieces of poetry that were sent to Volume 35 this time. Are there any poets in the audience who are ready to read and share their work? Any other poets?
Yes, I would like to. Denise Sutherland.
I beg your pardon?
Yes, I think I would like to. Denise Sutherland.
Okay, Denise.
On page 94 is my first poem called Temptress.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll start now. You can drink the Caribbean Sea from her lips, taste the coconut milk on her skin and still never be full. Hints of ginger hide in the bush of her untamed curls. Her breasts, brown nipples in full bloom, peek at you through a sheer blouse. You smile at her as you ponder how you'll recover after she breaks your heart. She's a temptress, a backside thick with beans, rice, fried yellow plantains, pork, and oxtails. She walks, her curvaceous hips move like wildfire through green rainforest. Each luring step a dance of compa, salsa, bachata, merengue, calypso, soca, reggae. She's a goddess. Her kiss of fairy heaven, body an inferno. Her face, angel sweet as sugar cane, temper like a hurricane. It will be love at first sight. She'll be the love of your life. And your mango island of cascading waterfalls, lush mountains and deep valleys, her hair adorned with red hibiscuses, the same color of her lips, voluptuous body dressed in a Victoria's Secret white lace and satin crotchless teddy, her smooth legs in sheer stockings with garter belts. After 2 glasses of rum, she'll become your hot breath. Limbs will bend like green palms, satisfy every desire you ever had. Orchards like gossip will flourish between her legs. And where do hummingbirds live? Under her tongue, her soft, warm mouth, a man grows waiting.
Okay, lots of imagery there. Can you tell us what inspired that?
Caribbean woman. My mother
Caribbean
was, my grandmother was from St. Croix. And, you know, I lived in the Caribbean community for many years. Some of my best girlfriends are from the Caribbean. You know, they're very beautiful, alluring. So that they inspired me.
Okay, thank you. Any response to that poem? Any comments or response to that poem?
Nope. I have one more poem that I wrote that was published. It's the next poem. It's called Angel Friend on page 96. Haitians say every bread has its oven. You say every bun has its cheese. I say I am the silver sea softening the calluses on your hands, the ginger spice laughing on your tongue, the slow burning sienna sunrise over your shoulder. You are the calm after my fever, the star that guides me in my darkness, the spine in my back, the glue that keeps me intact. I will be your home if you had none, the air you breathe. If you are drowning, I will find you. If you are lost, together we will drink our last glass of rum. My last morsel of bread is for you.
Wonderful. Can you tell us what inspired that?
My best friend. He was my boyfriend for many years. And then he just turned into a best friend. He's from Haiti. He was born in Haiti. So he inspired me.
Okay. Are there any responses to that particular piece?
I really love, there's the line, the ginger spice laughing on your tongue.
Yeah.
That is really beautiful.
Thank you.
And especially sort of to the using of the verb laughing, to laugh, right? Instead of, because and then afterwards you have the slow burning, right? You could say sort of the ginger spice burning, but laughing, the tingling aspect, which is a very nice imagery, but it's also a very good linguistic, poetic twist. I like that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments on that piece? Okay, thank you. Is there another poet who would like to share?
I'll read my poem, Pink Typewriter, if there's time.
Okay, what page is that on?
154.
Okay.
You sweet me, locals say to one another, like dialect sweetens me, nation, natal, language, returns me to honey sound days. My typewriter, the color pink of Dunkley Dairy's strawberry ice cream, berry cotton candy, with alphabet keys held inside a metal frame, like a mouthful of sugar cubes, helps to write the sun-tongue swoon of childhood days. My fingers chubby as overweight legs on a gym stairs machine, have to strike down hard. Each rung rises like a scythe ready to cut cane. Letters on a poem
Looks like she's frozen.
Yeah,
page,
she's frozen.
ants on a wall, sheets of paper pour from the royal plastic carriage, roll out like slabs of sticky icing for white coconut cake, porous as the island's limestone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Can you tell us what inspired that?
I was inspired by the way that I, as a Bermudian, speak when I'm in Bermuda, and just by the sound of dialect, and how that takes me back to my childhood, and it takes me into the island and its sensibilities. You know, it's just a very different way of orientating to the English language and to memory. And so it's a connection for me to the sensuality of the island and a kind of visual thinking that, let's say, standard English doesn't provide for me. So Pink Typewriter is really honoring the way a Bermudian speaks and the way I speak when I'm on the island.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So
Yeah.
so you're saying you code switch? When you're not on the island, you speak another way, and then when you're on Bermuda, you speak in the vernacular?
I speak like this when I'm here in Connecticut. And when I speak to my sister on the phone, I go right into the dialect, just like that. You know, we speak in Bermudian, so.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any comments, any responses to that presentation?
I just wanted to say, as another Bermudian, I really that poem really resonates with me. I really enjoy it. All the references, Dunkley's Dairy, the limestone, the banana bread curl lane, it's just wonderful. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Welcome, Bermuda.
And I enjoyed your poem, Jaylene. Thank you for Bermuda Day.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Andrea.
Do we have another author, another poet who would like to share a poem?
Oh, can I just say, when that first line, "It sweet me," I thought you were saying something, you know, about Jamaican, because that is one of the things that we say all the time, "Lord, it sweet me." But it just shows how connected we are. I've been thinking a lot about the Caribbean space and, you know, like just how we're connected and just little bits of our language. The way it pops up all over the place is really lovely.
Yes, the V being W and that being switched. Yeah.
But, you know, I think that sweet meat, I've heard the Antiguans talk about things sweetening them, and the Virgin Islanders talk about things sweetening them. And
yes,
I think it's a Caribbean thing.
It's a beautiful expression.
I think we're more alike than we sometimes
definitely.
we realize sometimes.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
Okay. Is there another poet who would like to share? I see a few poets. I see the names coming up. I see Erica Mapp. I see Berkeley Semple. I see.
I would like to read.
Okay, Berkeley. Our newest board member. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. This poem is called Islands in the City.
What page?
It's page 159. All this going about the world asking if I can occupy this basement for a year or two. And you, and you, and you staying on too long, islanding old cities, getting wife, seeding children. insulting the white of tundra with your contradictory blackness, as if not a damn thing was wrong with this less than painter's light that defaced the day, rushing up like a hooligan to the unperturbed glass of an office behind which you sit dreaming of home, a seller of bonds, a teacher to tykes, a cleaner of nursing homes, attendant to the feeble and palsy, a stringer of cables over the wide highways, islands in the city of the world. New York breaks with us. There is no more American dream. Our otherness is more other now. When we drift up from our subterranean abode, like Dante through circles of kindness to rondelay, summer pavements for dominoes and fire of good home rum, and sauce sold by a woman catering to our nostalgia. Sorry, this is my place there. We repeat like a mantra, boy, soon as I retire is gone, I gone back home. The thing is all mixed up, causing schizophrenia. Is home where you left or where you are living? Where you were born or where you labor to own a plot of lawn edged with a fierce accuracy? A house in a neighborhood where noises have gone to the birds, where your seedlings planted sprung with roots firm and foreign, saying outside your earshot, what if daddy gets sick when he goes to that place he calls home? It will tear you good and proper, deciding how to leave home, to go back home.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing. So what inspired that poem?
Yeah, it's the constant conversation of West Indians who live in New York. It's like, I am gone. That's what they say every time. Up to the moment when they actually do retire, and then they're thinking about, oh, I got to stay for my doctor, you know, I need health care or whatever. So a lot of this is just what I hear in conversation, especially of my father's age and my mother's age. And now of my age, people who have retired and wanted to go back home after spending more than half their lives in snow countries around the world, especially here in New York.
Good. Thank you for that. I think there's a sort of nostalgia that sets in when people get to an age where they yearn for the other time when their life was not complicated. You know, as you get a little older, there are complications and layers that your life becomes sort of layered. And you look back at that period, you know. Well, I think we have some comments. And somebody said, I'm loving this move by the readings of Kamau. Devastating work and also the great poems being read now, thank you. And Velma Pollard says, agreeing with Elaine Savory. Thank you. Is there another poet who would like to share?
Can I ask Berkeley a question?
Oh, go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah. In terms of style, I'm just wondering how conscious or aware, or what's the purpose of mixing the short lines with those long lines?
I'm not very conscious of, of that. Actually, that's a good question. But with respect to line breaks, I'm usually conscious of how the poem is shaped more than how the poem is, you know, how it looks on the page is as a sort of an aesthetic value for me. But I try never to break on, say, an article like the, you know, so, you know, I try to break, and I mean, the lines are enjambed, so they just run on from one end to the next.
I notice a lot of the poets here their lines are enjambed. The poem kind of take on the shape of the ideas. They run with the feelings, so that they stop at places where the maybe the thought of the feeling just stops on the page. So, you know, I find that that's the style that runs throughout here. A lot of the lines are just, they break, and people try not to break at the articles, of course, because, you know, that doesn't give the kind of punch you want. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Are there any other comments on Berkeley Sample's work or any other pieces that we've done so far? And is there another poet who would like to share their work now? Okay, so we don't have any other persons who would like to share, or are we being shy tonight? Okay, so I'd like to ask maybe somebody in the audience to tell me, when you write a poem, do you plan it out in your head, or do poems just come to you in your dreams, or is it that you see a situation and you decide that I want to write about that? How do you come up with how do you put your inspiration on paper? Any comments? How do you put your inspiration on paper? What is some of the advice you would give to another author, a young up and coming author, about capturing your experiences on paper?
I was saying sometimes very quickly before you forget what you're trying to do. But in most instances, I think I'm inspired by an image, usually. And then sometimes I start out that way. And sometimes I have no idea of the idea until it comes to me. But I sometimes write the entire poem very quickly. And then it takes a longer time to go back and edit it. And then you yourself sometimes can see the idea, which is married to the image. But and some poems are fairly deliberate because you have an idea or you want to comment on something that you've seen. And so that becomes more of a sort of planning, and like what kind of shape, what stance you'll use, what kind of form you will use. So that's more of a kind of a process. But most poems come to me by an image.
Yeah. I think what I've heard recommendations made by poets is that in your first sitting, when the idea comes to you, you just write it in once, just write it. And then the writing begins after you finish that first writing. Sometimes it may take months to get it done, but you write and then you go back and you begin to finally edit, shape, and it takes on a different shape sometimes. Is there anyone else who would like to share their process? Thank you, Berkeley.
I will share, Alcest, if that's okay.
Sure, certainly.
This is Natalie. I think that initially, I spent many years waiting for the whole poem to show up on my doorstep. And it was just like you're gonna vomit it out and it would all be there in one go. And that didn't work out very well because I spent many years not producing a lot of work. And then I got some help in a Calabash workshop. Mazan was a part of my group. Hi, Mazan. And it brought home to me the importance of writing as a part of a daily routine. And so I am almost always on the lookout for something that could be a part of a poem. And so I would say that my advice to someone who's just beginning to write or an emerging writer would be to always be writing on your phone. If you prefer a notepad, I'm still very much in love with my illegible handwriting on paper. So I do that quite a bit. And I've also let go of the thought that the poem will ever be finished. You're going to be editing it all the way to the publishers. And so I save everything and I recycle things. So I might write it this year, as you've said, and maybe next year I forgot about it and I remember, oh, maybe I can use this here. And it really becomes a work of craft. Where I try to do justice to the theme I'm working on. And I also find that I take a lot of time to figure out if the way in which I'm narrating the poem is authentic. So I like to use musicality in my poems, and I don't mean rhyming, I just mean the flow of it. So I like to read it out loud to see if when I hear it, it's giving me a cadence and a particular flow. And sometimes I don't want any stanzas. Sometimes it's short, sometimes it's long, but I try to find a way to deliver it that's true to the particular work that I am trying to relate.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. What role does reading play in your writing? Yeah, and that's thrown out to anybody who would like to, and maybe Nathan, you can answer that question as well. What role is
Sure.
reading in your writing? Reading other people's work?
I am going to say that I don't read as much as I used to, meaning that I certainly have not read as many poets as maybe I should have, but I studied French literature and it changed my life. And in French literature, I also looked at French African literature, and that was a total game changer because it's a very different cultural perspective about how to express yourself. And so when I think about Obiptek and the Song of Lowaino and these kinds of works, I mean, it's fantastic. And so I guess everybody writes for different reasons, but for me, I'm really wanting to tell my own Jamaican Caribbean story and to be true to that. But I find that having read in another language and having read writers from other cultural spaces, it has brought a richness to the way I see my own writing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There's somebody else who would like to comment on that. What role does reading play in your writing? Some people say when I'm writing, I don't like to read other people's work. And some people say that's foolish. That, you know, there's no original thing. Is you always build on other people's ideas, and it then shapes into something brand new. That's what some people say. So any other thoughts?
I can comment.
Yes,
For me, yeah, Ms. Ann here. I tend to have, depending on what I'm writing, I will have 3 or 4 things that I'm just constantly rereading. Maybe 5, maybe 6, but because, you know, it might be similar themes, or maybe there is just something that I'm finding that's similar there. So while writing, there are usually about 4 or 5 books open that I'm constantly just, and it might just be a paragraph from every book. It might be a chapter, it might be a poem. It's not just, it even might be a play, even for poetry. Sometimes it's a screenplay. It can be very different. But the point is, it's just a certain number of books that are very specific to whatever it is I'm writing. But generally, other than that, I like to just read for pleasure. So it doesn't matter if it's Caribbean literature or fantasy or Toni Morrison. It's always going to be, or Audre Lorde. It's just something that at the end of the day is mentally stimulating, something that I'll probably journal about and then say, oh, could this be a poem? And then I'll return to that while I'm writing a poem. That makes sense.
Okay. So Lydia Crawford says, thank you for all this session. It was quite informative. I must leave due to a conflict, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you. And Nizana Yuka says, yay, Calabash workshop. And somebody says, 19173 says, I love this discussion, so thank you for the invite. I wish I was in St. Croix. And somebody who's Iona Gara says, hi all, I'm currently writing my dissertation for my creative writing master's. I'm studying in the UK and I do not have any Caribbean lectures to support my writing. Is there any poetry, fiction that you would recommend? I'm in dire need of some inspiration. Anybody want to answer that question? Somebody in some dire need of some inspiration. Well, the Caribbean Writer is a good place to go to. And then there are lots of Caribbean books. I go back to reread old Caribbean books. I'm right now reading Cannon Shot and Glass Beads by George Lamming, an old book that was published in, I believe it was published in 1974. And it's just such an engaging read. I've been reading it over and over and over again.
I have a recommendation, Alsace.
Yes.
For your UK-based person. You can reach out to the Black Cultural Archives. It's located in Brixton. And if you go to the website of the Black Cultural Archives, you'll see that there's a bookstore, and you could perhaps order things online. I understand that they're opening up in the summer. So if you get in touch with them, there's quite a bit of diaspora writers or Caribbean persons who've gone to live in England, and their work is more than likely stored there. My other recommendation is that you could get in touch with the librarian of the special collection here at the University of the West Indies. Mona, I would imagine Cave Hill or St. Augustine, any of the 3 campuses, and certainly your university, Alsace. If you contact the librarian, this is probably the easiest way that you could build up a reference list of books that would be helpful to your research.
A good place to go is to EBSCO. The EBSCO publishes a variety of books, and you can get them at your library and our library here at the university as well.
And Digital Libraries of the Caribbean as well.
And Digital Libraries of the Caribbean is available, and that's a site that's kept up by the University of Miami, and they have a range of books. And what I like about the Digital Libraries of the Caribbean, you can get newspapers from all over the region. You can get very old publications some of them are no longer in print. You can get it from there as well. So that is a great place to go. Digital Libraries of the Caribbean, and get your work. And I'd like to just take a moment to share the cover of volume 35 is a photo of Kamau Brathwaite that has been somehow enhanced and shaped a little differently by Mervyn Ware, who is here with us tonight. And I just want to thank him so much for taking the time to design our cover for us for this publication. It's a very stunning piece of work, and we really appreciate all the time he took to put that together. Thank you, Mervyn. Well, folks, are there any afterwards?
If you don't mind, to answer your question, I'll read a poem that deals with, I guess, the writing of poetry.
Okay.
And the struggles. It's on page 107. It's called Words and Desires.
Okay.
Yeah, 107. Words and Desires.
Okay.
Words like dust devils in my head swirl and loop with vigor. I tried holding on to the floor of sleep, but fragments of phrases and images like twigs, tumbleweed, and grains of sand needle prick my eyes. I become a zombie to poetry, heeding a call to wrestle with language and the pounding of syntactic gusts. How can I be my own master when I am deprived of sleep and the language mill possesses my labor? Silence is a temporary freedom from utterance, but not an exile from thoughts. When the seraph pummels his drums, language must wiggle and dance to ejaculate its desires from the mouths of poets.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Very good. Thank you. Any what inspired that? The whole notion of creating a poem?
Yeah, I mean, I try to write every day. And I think it's the notions of there's an image, there's a desire, and trying to write every day would be fragments. And those fragments, that first word or first image will take you somewhere else. So is that openness for possibilities. As you know, my mentor Yusef Komenyaka would say, poetry is about extended possibilities, and how willing are you to go into a realm where those fragments might take you. It might be painful, it might be playful, but it's to be open to those possibilities, and then pushing the language somewhere else so that it's not cliche. And then if it were to be cliche, how do you twist it, turn it into something new, something very fresh, but yet being truthful to the kind of rhythm aspect of the Caribbean, so that your reading will work. Although Caribbean might not be mentioned in there, you know that this has a particular rhythm tendency that it is from somewhere else. So again, it's that burning sensation to write.
Thank you very much. Any comments? I see Ms. Velma Pollard is with us. Welcome. I shouldn't have called you out. I'm sorry. We can't hear you.
I have been the whole time. I just didn't.
Yeah, I noticed that, but I didn't see your image, so I'm sorry if I'm calling you out. Okay.
Yes, I'd like to comment on that poem. This is Denise Sutherland.
Yes, go right ahead.
Yes, I like the phrase where it's written to wrestle with language, because when I'm writing poetry, that's what it's like for me. Writing poetry is I'm constantly wrestling with the English language, which phrase would seem better, what word would go where. So I like that that phrase, to wrestle with language, because to me that's what writing is about. We're constantly wrestling with what words to use, what phrase. So what image, to present on a page or on a computer. So I think that's a very good way to express.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Did the suggestions made by Natalie Cortesy, did that help you with your request for support? Denise?
I'm sorry, repeat. I'm sorry.
Did were you the one who requested some information about resources?
No, that was somebody else, Iona O'Gara.
Okay. Okay.
It was Iona O'Gara.
Iona O'Gara, okay. Because Natalie gave some very, very helpful resources. Anyone else would like to comment? Right now it's free flowing. You can make a comment about the session, any recommendations for the session for going forward. We're going to be doing this again in another, I believe it's another month and a half. And this time we're going to do the fiction and combine it with some of the poetry.
Velma is here, and Ms. Pollard, I would like to say that people should read her work, which is extremely important. Both sort of creative as well as her critical work, and perhaps the Caribbean writer could do a special issue on Ms. Pollard's work, which I think might be important.
There you go. Throw out the gauntlet.
Just to say, full many a black was born to blush unseen. Thank you.
Oh, you're blushing unseen.
Right.
I must tell you, Patrick, that Ms. Pollard is one of our greatest supporters. She always responds when we reach out, and so she is somebody who we think about very seriously as well. So those thoughts have not gone on the sand.
Yeah, just a quick comment on reading. I think the question was asked before. I do read everything that comes out of the Caribbean. A lot of poetry, some of the books, some of the fiction I do review them. But I think reading has a great influence on what I write. And this might be the same for you, Patrick. It seems to me that some of the poems, when I go back and look at them, I can say, well, hey, that was my Kamau Brathwaite phase. Like a direct influence. Or that was, John Robert Lee phase, or even some of the really new poets that I'm impressed by, like Vladimir Lucien or any of those guys, or what is this guy? He's such a good guy. Hutchinson from Jamaica there.
Aishun.
Yes.
Aishun,
Aishun, yes. So he was really interesting to me because when I was reading him, I was really surprised. It was like the language was surprising me, but the way he kind of like, it was like one of those real pleasures of reading poetry, where you come away like, oh, but he's so young. So I get very surprised, and so I go back to my thing and say, oh man, let me look at how Ishion does that, and then I can see in a couple of days, I have an Ishion poem type thing, so I'm always kind of influenced by reading. And like I said, I read an awful lot, more than I write, frankly. But a lot of Caribbean stuff, but a lot of fantasy, a lot of stuff from everywhere. So my mind is really, really open, and I've always been a prolific reader. And so, and it also inspires me, it inspires me to write because I see new things, and it really does help me. I would sometimes in the middle of reading the book on the bus or on a train, never when I'm driving, of course, but I would put down the book and start my poem based upon what I read. I would start just like that. So yes, reading is possibly the greatest influence for me on my writing.
I think that a writer must read. If you're not reading, the richness that you can get from reading is lost. And I have a lot of friends who are writers who, if you go to their house, they have maybe 5 books on their bed, another 5 books on their couch, books on their kitchen counter. And I'm like that as well. And so I'm kind of glad that my family is gone, and my house and my books, they live with me. So I understand about the reading. We have to always be reading, and it's really tough on your eyes as you get a little older there. But I think a writer must be an editor. A writer must be a reader. And to say that you're not going to read somebody's work because it's going to influence your work is really ridiculous, because you gain inspiration that way. Are there any other comments from this wonderful group?
I would like to say something about reading. I can remember flying to Bermuda on a Delta airplane and reading Walcott's Midsummer. And I was just struck by the fact that island life was put into poetry so eloquently, so powerfully, so originally, so visually. And I have to say, it was that moment that I decided I would use language to write about my island, Bermuda. So writing and reading go together. Yes.
And at least Melissa McKenzie says, thanks so much for affirming the importance of reading in enriching one's writing.
Yes.
And Naima Wade says, abundant gratitude to everyone for sharing. Okay, well, we are coming close to the end of our evening. And this was, I hope that you found this to be a wonderful dessert to your dinner. And we hope to do this again. I'm telling you, we had some trepidations about this particular session because of the nature of Brathwaite's work. It's in some instances it's very tight and so otherly in a way that I was wondering if people would get involved in the discussion, and sometimes people don't read before they come, and so we were having all this talk about how it would turn out tonight, and this has exceeded our expectations. So we're really grateful and thank you to you for your support of the Caribbean Writer, and especially now that the world is in a financial turmoil. A lot of journals and publications are going through financial issues as well, and so with writers like you out there giving us the support, it makes our work worthwhile. So Charlene and I, Spencer and I, thank you very much, and of course Adrian and Matthias, who are our technical support, always there. Like they cradle us in all of these activities. So we want to thank you very much for coming out, and please come back again. We're going to invite you to. There are 4 sessions in the series. This is the first of the 4 sessions, and so
thank you.
Thank you
so much.
We will return.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And
thank you, Ms. Access.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Everyone
Okay, and thank you to the readers, to all the readers who helped to make tonight so wonderful. I think we're going to make that part a little bit of an institution, have people read for us.
Yeah, I
so
think
much.
so.
Yes,
that was very good. And
yeah,
thanks for the big up, Mr. Sylvain.
Yes, Mr. Sylvain. Thanks for putting it out there. Okay.
You're welcome for the big up. Welcome.
All righty. Okay. Bye-bye. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Okay,
Take care. Okay, bye.